Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here coming at you from the KnifeCenter. And today, it's time to take a look at the coolest new knives that have hit our shelves in the last week. Let's check them out. All right, the first one I want to show you today, our initial batches have been coming in of the new swayback from Spyderco. Now I say initial batches because all of that first batch actually has gone to filling our pre-orders for this item. We are getting more in very soon though, so if you want to reserve your spot in line, you can still pre-order this at the link below. But I'm really excited to get my hands on this because this is not something they had with them at SHOT Show earlier this year. So this is my first hands-on experience with it. Now price on this is $273 right now. And this is made by the same designer as created the Spidey Chef from Spyderco, which is actually one of my favorite Spyderco knives of all time. It's one of the knives in my EDC rotation. The guy's name, and I'm going to say this wrong because I don't know how to pronounce it. You guys can let me know in the comments the right way. It's either Marcin Sliz or Marcin Slitch. I don't know. Let me know. You guys know who I'm talking about, though, I'm sure. But the aesthetic of this is kind of similar to the Spidey Chef, but it's kind of wrapped up in this really old school swayback pattern. The name of the knife is actually named for this distinctive handle shape, which is something you saw on a bunch of old slip joint patterns, the swayback handle, which you could have a number of different blades on, of course. But the Spyderco swayback comes with this, well, let's see, what would you call that? I guess you'd call that a Wharncliffe profile, even though it slopes a little bit kind of like a sheep's foot, but we get CTS XHP steel, a nice hollow grind, and a really good stone washed finish that's going to provide some good working protection for your blade. Now the handle itself is made from titanium and it also features a stone washed finish, which I really like. That's one thing that the Spidey Chef that I carried, still carry, came with a flat finish, and eventually it's going to pick up some wear from your pocket and it starts to look really cool. But I like this broken in look right from the factory a little bit better still. This whole knife was actually a little bit larger than I initially thought it would be, just based on the photos. In fact, we've got a 3.5-inch blade here, so plenty of length to get your work done, and a very hand-filling grip as well, despite its slim nature. We've got some nice contouring to the handles. Like the Spidey Chef, we've also got this sort of cutout here at the leading edge of the scale, sort of like a thumb scallop, so to speak. So it's going to pinch really nicely. Pardon my Band-Aid there. It's really nice. Lockup is real good. We've got a hardened steel insert on the lock bar this time, something the Spidey Chef lacked. And we have a 2-position pocket clip, right or left side tip up. And we've got the traditional Spidey hole for opening. I will say, with my larger fingers, I do find it a little bit tricky to open. I do kind of you can get the hang of it, but for me, I mean, you can see just how big my thumb is next to that cutout. Your more average sized fingers out there will probably have less of an issue with it, but there you go. That's just my take on it. It's really cool. They're coming in fresh very soon, so if you want one, get your pre-orders in below. But hopefully soon these are just going to be on the shelf and you can order them right away. All right, some of the next big news this week is actually came from last week. We had the surprise unveil of a new ZT. This is the 707, which comes in just under $250 right now. This is a really good representation of the executive knife. It would make a great gentleman's knife. 3.5-inch blade of 20 CV. So not only is the knife made in America, the steel is also made in America, which is quite nice. And I really like the long, acute profile here. They managed to have a really aggressive tip so that you're gonna have no problem doing any kind of piercing, whether you're opening boxes or packages, any kind of fine detail work. But you still get a nice continuous curve to the edge and a full flat grind on some fairly thin blade stock, not super thin, so it's gonna slice really nicely as well. Now what sets this knife apart though is this. The detent for the flipper is actually nested into the carbon fiber side rather than on the lock bar itself as is typical. When you go to open it, even with a lot of pressure on that lock bar, it still flips out quickly and smoothly on the KVT bearings in the pivot. Moving back, we've got carbon fiber on the front side and titanium on the back. Frame lock, of course, it is a ZT after all. And this runs on their KVT bearing system, so the flipping action, very nice as you would expect. The titanium on the back has a stonewash finish, kind of like that Spyderco, and we've also got a really nice stonewashed finish on the blade, which I mentioned this, I actually showed this in our Best of the Month video last week. That stonewash finish provides a good finish for a working knife since your scratches are going to blend in, but I always think it looks great, especially when paired with carbon fiber. It has a really classy look, that particular combination, so it's really cool to see it here as well. The knife, of course, folds up nice and slim, as you would expect, so it doesn't take up very much room in the pocket, yet it still gets you that nice long 3.5-inch blade, and it carries nice and deep too. You can see here we've got a deep carry clip folded over from the back end of the knife. This is very similar to the new 235 from ZT in its execution and shape. So it's really subtle, it's just plain black, there's no branding on there. So if that's all you see sticking out of a pocket of a pair of slacks or even your jeans if you're dressing down a little bit, whatever you're wearing, just that little bit of pocket clip sticking out does not look like a knife at all. It's just gonna look like a nice ink pen, for example. And the way it attaches is actually inside the scale itself. There's an inset pocket on both sides. You can do it on the carbon fiber side or the titanium side, and it shares a mounting screw with this backspacer right here. It's a pretty cool and nice and subtle rendition. It does two things that I really like. It does allow it to be very extremely deep carry since it kind of wraps around the back end of the knife, and also since the screw holes, or since it screws from the inside, you don't have any screw holes on the outside to either look bad. Some people I know don't like the look of extra screw holes that they're never going to use. And then you don't have to worry about, a common solution to that is to put a little blockout plate on there. So you don't have to worry about that either with this particular iteration. So I really think it's a very elegant solution to that dilemma. Now, if you prefer a slightly beefier aesthetic to your fancy knife, I've got a new design here from Reate by Tashi Barucha. This is the T3000, and it comes in right now at $310. The blade here is M390, and it comes in just under 3 inches when you measure it from the tip out to the front of the handle scale there. And a really cool shape. It's you got your recurve clip point essentially. And the recurve is not too aggressive, so it's not going to be super difficult to sharpen, and this is still going to be a useful shape day to day. Now the build here is a little bit more robustly spec'd out. The blade, as you can see, the steel itself is a little bit thicker, as well as being a taller blade, but the flat grind does come up a little bit higher too than it does on that ZT, so it's still going to slice pretty well, I think. The edges are finished nicely, nice and chamfered here, and you don't have any jimping to be super aggressive on your thumb, and the spine itself is going to be real comfortable to press on as well. The frame itself is titanium, and they meet here in the center. It kind of mimics the look of some of the integral knives out there, since we don't have a open-backed backspacer design like you see with this ZT. But it meets up in a really cool fashion, and you get this cool angular look here at the top of the spine. It's not uncomfortable though. It melds into the hand quite nicely. And then you see we've got a hidden lanyard attachment point there as well, which is quite nice. Milled titanium pocket clip, right side tip up only. And as you can see, inlays on both sides of the knife. And we've got a few different options. I really like this burlap micarta right here, but we've also got some more standard canvas micartas as well as some carbon fiber options. Maybe a little bit more than that, but there's plenty of different ones to choose from. And I think all of those come in at that 310 mark as well. Actually, some of them come up to 320 depending on which one you choose. There's also a few different options for anodized color on the pivot hardware as well, if you want something different than just the plain gray. But it's a really cool looking knife, and it's going to be a good performing knife. I like the way when it's folded up, the flipper tab doesn't stick out too much. It's really subtly integrated, but you still have a nice finger landing spot here in front of the flipper because it cuts out of the frame just a little bit. So you're able to really stage on that flipper quite nicely, flip it open, and you've just got a real cool look. All right, speaking of a cool looking flipper, we've got a new design here from Artisan Cutlery. This is a Dirk Pinkerton design called the Tacit, and this one's a little more affordable than the Reate. This comes in at about $186 right now. For that, you've got about a 3.5-inch upswept Tonto blade with Artisan's Damascus, which is a VG10 based Damascus, so it looks good and is going to give you some pretty decent performance as well. It's not just a pretty face. It is a titanium frame lock flipper, and we'll get the specs out of the way. Lock bar insert with an over travel arrestor, nice snappy action, and just really well put together, just like Artisan's doing very well these days. We've got open-backed construction mostly, but we do have a backspacer here, and that's where you see the Artisan Cutlery name, as well as a lanyard point there as well. Apart from the dramatic shape, I think one of the most noticeable things just right off the bat with this knife is the stop pins for the flipper itself are actually located outside, and the stop is actually molded into the handle or milled out of the handle rather than capturing it on the inside essentially. So it's kind of cool. You can't quite use them as thumb studs. Yeah, it's a little too close to the pivot to get the proper leverage on it. It's just a cool, different look for this type of knife, and I think it's pretty neat. So I really like the way the knives are kind of flowing one into the next this week. We've got, I think, some cool continuity as we go from knife to knife. This next one is another upswept Tanto, but a little narrower in profile. This is the new design from VDK. This is called the Strix, and it comes in at $350 right now. So the longest blade we've looked at so far this week, about 3 3/4 of an inch long, with M390 steel with a nice two-tone horizontal and vertical satin finish, horizontal on the flats and vertical on the hollow ground portions as well. Hollow ground here, I should say, the tip, of course, is flat ground, and the swedge itself is also flat. We've got a few different colors to choose from. This right here is the green anodized aluminum, and this is another one that's going to be an easy to carry knife, despite a really distinctive and kind of showy look. It's going to carry very easily since it does fold up more narrowly than that Reate or that Artisan. But the action, of course, is quite good, as you would expect. And you can see here on the inside, the weight is really good too. Titanium, of course, is nice and lightweight to begin with, but we've got some milled out pockets on the inside, some weight relief there as well. And this is another one that fits into the hand really nicely. We've got some nice contouring, nice radius to the handle itself. It's just a really nice piece, as you would expect from VDK. It is quite expensive though, I will admit, and if you want something with kind of an outsized personality like this knife, this isn't a cleaver blade shape per se, but I've got a new cleaver here from Gerber that, like I said, even though the blades are different, you kind of get a similar vibe, but the Gerber, of course, is going to do it for you on a budget. This is the new Asada, coming in at about $40. Now, there are going to be options in the future for some different handle materials, including some canvas micarta, and those are a little bit more expensive. And you can get your pre-orders in now. We'll make sure to leave a link to the whole Asada series down below. But this one right here, I think, looks really good with this anodized red aluminum. Now, the blade steel is 7CR17 MOV, so I know a lot of you are just going to kind of pass it over immediately just because of that, and that's okay. It's certainly nothing to write home about in terms of outright performance, but it is going to sharpen really easily. And again, this comes in at a very affordable knife considering everything you do actually get here, I think. The blade itself, tip to scale, measures just under 3 1/4, and we've got just over 3 inches of sharpened edge. The handle itself, I think, holds really nicely. There's plenty of space here because even if your hands are a little bit too big for the handle itself, we do have a generously sized finger choil here in front of the flipper tab. And again, like I said, I do have slightly, some pretty fat fingers, and even I'm able to fit in there quite nicely without poking up against the heel of the edge right there. And that's really going to let you put this blade to work. And I like the shape for just a kind of heavier utility knife. Even though it's a cleaver shape, because of the sort of clip-pointed leading edge here, we do have a fairly acute tip for piercing boxes or cutting through, getting the cut started into some cardboard, what have you. And we've got a real heavy stone-washed finish as well. Now, folding it up, you can see here on the back, we've got something that we saw on Gerber's flat iron cleaver previously, which is not a flipper, but it's this pinch plate here that is a really nice way to kind of solve the issue you get sometimes when you grip when you're trying to open the knife and you're gripping the lock bar itself. You can actually put a little bit of pressure on the blade, make it harder to open. This actually alleviates that problem, and it also acts as an over travel arrestor when you're going to unlock the knife as well. We've got ball bearings in the pivot on this design too, so it flippers open quite nicely indeed. That's why I say, like, even though the steel may not be something that the steel snobs of us out there, myself included, are going to get real excited about, it's only a $40 knife, and it really feels very well put together, I have to say. I gotta say though, it is really nice to see Gerber putting some designs out there like this that are aimed at the enthusiasts out there, or at least the budget-minded enthusiasts out there. And to that end, here's another design that when I saw it at SHOT Show earlier this year, I thought it was cool, but didn't really think much more about it. But the more I hold this knife, the more I'm actually impressed by it. And this is the Sumo, and it's another very affordable knife coming in at just $37, or just under right now. The reason I'm so impressed with this is the fit and finish is quite good, especially for a sub $40 knife. And we've got Gerber's iteration of the crossbar lock, which of course Benchmade's Axis lock serves as the archetype, and their execution of it here on a knife that's so affordable is really, really, really good. Now they're calling it their pivot lock, but like I said, it's that same kind of crossbar style lock. We've got that bar making this an ambidextrous knife going through both sides of the handle. You can pull back and flick it closed. Now, of course, we've got a very generously sized thumb cutout here, so you could open it with your thumb, but you can just pull that lock bar back and flick it open with a little bit of wrist action, and it's nice and smooth. Like I said, they've done this very well, which I find very impressive at the price point. Now the steel itself, again, it's that 7CR, so it's not going to be an edge retention champ, but again, it's a sub $40 knife, and you've got a full 4-inch blade, or just under 4 inches here to work with. And it's got a really good usable shape for just about anything out there, and a nice full flat grind, so it's going to slice really well also. The handles are black and white G10, and we've got a nice blue liner here to provide a nice pop of color. Nice generous lanyard slot here at the back, and of course a pocket clip that is reversible to the left or the right side, which again makes this a great option for both lefties and righties because that lock is completely ambidextrous as well. Now initially I kind of wish that the handle didn't taper quite so much near the back, but as I've been holding it and kind of manipulating it, I do feel like I still have a really solid grip on the knife, and I'm really going to be able to put this knife to a lot of work. Now it may seem like I'm overselling this knife a little bit, but let me explain why I'm really trying to sell you guys on the concept of this particular knife. I'm like a lot of you guys out there. I kind of overlooked this knife. The specs on the steel didn't really do it for me, but it's got some features that you really, you have a hard time seeing at this price point, and they're done just as well as knives that cost at least twice as much or more in terms of the execution of the lock. It's just really great. A lot of folks out there can't afford an Axis lock. So to have this option out there and such a compelling iteration of it on a very useful knife, let's be quite honest here, is really a thing of beauty. Now, being as it's a big blade, about 4 inches, I think it would be cool to see some smaller versions of this knife in the future. But if you don't want to wait, I've actually got a kind of similarly shaped knife here from another company. This is from SOG, and as you can see when I hold them up next to each other, kind of a few similarities there. But let's talk about this. This is the new Aegis AT, which is part of their kind of revitalization of some of their classic models, in bringing them up to date a little bit, making some improvements on it. And we've seen this knife before, but we've got some new colors on it right now. And this comes in at about 85 right now. For that, you're getting a D2 blade, just a bit over 3 inches, with a nice protective black coating, which of course is going to help the stain resistance of the steel, since D2 is not a stainless. But you're going to get some good edge retention. And this one in particular, especially with this color, is going to be a really nice kind of outdoors oriented knife, as well as a good hard-working EDC. And normally I don't think an outdoors knife needs a black coating, or at least an outdoors folder, but that extra corrosion resistance is going to be appreciated in those situations. Now the handle itself is a little bit larger than you might expect for a just over 3-inch blade, but the advantage of that is, again, a full working grip, even if you do have larger hands out there. That way you're really going to be able to put some muscle behind some cuts while having a very secure and safe hold on the sharpened edge itself. But we've still got an ambidextrous lock and a pocket clip that can go onto either side. Deep carry in this case, and the SOG lettering on this clip is a lot more subtle than some of the SOG knives in the past. For those of you who that was a turnoff, you don't have to worry about that here. Now SOG's version of the crossbar lock, they're calling their XR lock. Or actually that's not quite true in this case, because this is an assisted knife. The assisted version of the XR lock, they're calling their AT lock, I believe. Make sure I have that right. I think I do. It doesn't matter. You can search for SOG Aegis AT to find this and the other versions. But what's nice is we have a spine-mounted safety here. As you can see, when it's red, it's ready to go. Flip that up, and it's not going to open up accidentally, even if you push on the thumb studs or anything like that. So that's a nice appreciated feature. It does only work when it's closed, though. You're not going to be able to put a secondary safety on the lock when it's open, but push the blade out, man, and that spring takes over, and it launches it out quite nicely. I'm really glad to see more companies, kind of iterating the crossbar lock design, because I think they're great. They're wonderfully ambidextrous, and you can keep your fingers out of the path of the blade when you close it as well. I always appreciate just kind of that added inherent extra degree of safety. All right, we've talked about the original Axis lock, but we haven't shown one yet today. we've got a new restock in now of the Greg Thompson designed SOCP folder from Benchmade. Of course, this is the axis lock folding version of the original SOCP dagger. And what you get here, for just over 160 bucks, you've got a really big blade in this case, 4.5 inches. Plenty of reach, nice sharp edge, and we've got D2 tool steel here with a pretty aggressive not fuller, you know what I mean, pretty aggressive swedge here going down the back. So you have the look of a double-edged dagger, but this is only single-edged. As I said, it's D2, but you've got a black Cerakote here to kind of protect the blade, and you've got the original axis lock in the handle, but the handles themselves are what I'm most excited about. This is Benchmade's new CF Elite material, which I am really liking on everything I've seen it on so far, and I can't wait to see it on some more models too. Essentially, it's a carbon fiber reinforced nylon, as opposed to the glass reinforced nylon, or GFN. What that gets you is even more strength, more rigidity than GFN, and less weight at the same time. And on top of that, kind of a cool look. It may look black on the camera, but it's kind of a graphite-y color, and you kind of see a little bit of shimmer going on underneath. It's really subtle, but it is something that kind of sets it apart from the other black knives out there. Got some nice radial milling around some holes on the handle, so the grip is going to be really good. You've got a folded over pocket clip that works on either side. It's not completely deep carry, because we do have the end of the knife sticking out, and we've got a glass breaker there. As far as opening, we've got an ambidextrous thumb plate, which you can use to open it with your thumb with either hand, or it's an axis lock. Just hold the lock back, flick it open, you're good to go. But for those of you who are looking for a fast deploying tactical knife, but maybe don't want to spring for an auto, or maybe you can't carry an automatic where you are, I think this is going to be a really nice option. All right, next we've got a knife that does not have a crossbar style lock, but they were trying to go for something that operated kind of similarly and gave you some similar advantages. This is the new CJRB Kicker knife, which is a flipper, and you can see the lock right here on the back. You can kind of operate it pretty much like any of those crossbar lock knives. You can hold it back. However, you can't really flick it open by holding the lock bar back. There's something in there that's holding it captive when you do that, but it's a flipper instead. You just flip that open quite nicely. Now this is actually a little bit different than the lock we showed on the new Artisan blowback last week. It kind of sits in a similar place, but the mechanics are a little bit different. And what I like about the CJRB version, a little bit better even, is there's no part of the lock that's behind the flipper tab, so your finger's not going to accidentally pull that back when you go to flip open the knife. So that's kind of nice. You can also do some other things like hold this back with a single index finger if you wanted to. It's just another neat little iteration or a kind of a riff on that style of lock while being a little bit different. Apart from that, it's the kind of the regular CJRB playbook. We've got a blade 3.5 inches with D2 steel and a stone washed finish. We've got liners liners underneath G10, a few different handle colors available, and a folded over pocket clip which is reversible to either side, and it all comes in at a very competitively priced 40 bucks right now. Speaking of competitively priced imports, we've got a new knife from Civivi this week. This is the Dogma flipper, coming in about 48 bucks right now. And Civivi kind of follows a similar formula that we saw on that Artisan just now. Almost 3.5 inch blade, D2 steel, G10 handle scales with a few different colors, over top a liner lock in this case, and a reversible deep carry pocket clip. So in terms of the materials and the execution, it's nothing groundbreaking from Civivi. It's right in line with the stuff they do really well. But I like what they've done with the iteration of the handle here. Again, G10, a few different colors available, but they've kind of given it a milled pattern that mimics some old bolstered knives, bolstered slip joints that would have a metal bolster and a jigged bone handle. There's a jigging pattern in the G10 here, which is pretty cool. Gives you a little bit of traction without being aggressive, and it's just a nice, kind of a neat little look that you don't see too often, especially on a budget flipper. Now we don't have a stone washed finish on this knife. Instead, we've got a simple satin finish. But you've got more opening options. Well, maybe not more opening options than that CJRB since it has that cool lock. But in addition to the flipper, you've got the thumb hole here, which of course you can do the middle finger flick. I'm not the best at it, and I got big fingers. Again, keep that in mind when I did that there, even though I didn't get super good results. Because it is kind of a narrow thumb cutout. But we've got ball bearings in the pivot. As you would expect, it's a Civivi after all, so it flips well. It's put together very nicely, and it's going to perform on a budget. All right, next I got something from Kizer, and it's sort of a smaller knife and a bit of a stubby looking design. This is a Justin Lundquist design. This is the Contrail, coming in just under 60 bucks. Blade itself is just over 2 inches, and we've got 154 cm. So you've got some pretty good edge retention, as well as having some stainless qualities as well. But in a few other ways, again, it's kind of similar to those other imported designs. We've got G10 handles, a few different colors, liner lock, single position pocket clip on this one, right side tip up only. It's a small utility knife. It's going to open quite nicely. We don't have ball bearings in the pivot because this is not a flipper, but it is smooth opening, and that sheep's foot blade is going to work pretty hard. But it gets its name, the Contrail, from these milled lines, milled diagonal lines here on the handle. You have kind of that Contrail motif as well. As far as the grip on the knife, it's about a 3-finger handle for me. If you want a little more length, of course, you've got a lanyard point here, or a lanyard hole here, where you could add a fob, and that could give your pinky something to grip onto. But even if you don't put a lanyard there, you're still going to be able to get a pretty good grip on it, because the width of the handle, or the height, I should say, is nice and tall, so that it really does sit in the hand quite nicely. You've got that nice flat surface area to grip onto. It's not, real spindly, and you're going to have a problem with it. Now, if you like this blade style, but you'd rather have a fixed blade instead of a folder, we've got some new knives from Viper that we've really been looking forward to since SHOT Show, not Blade Show. This is the new Berus, coming in starting at $129 right now. Now, what's really cool about these is there are several different options. I've just got 2 of them here, but there's 2 different blade shapes. We've got a sheep's foot and a drop point profile, and several different handle colors. We've got both green and black micarta, as well as marbled carbon fiber and standard carbon fiber. So when you take all those options together, I think there's 8 different knives that you can get right now. The drop point, I think, would make a great, well, both of them would make really good EDCs. But the drop point, in addition to that, I think would make a really good small hunting knife. You've certainly got pretty much only belly on this knife right here, and a nice classic drop point profile for that really small, kind of some of that smaller work out there. I managed to get about a 3.5-finger grip on this knife. Again, it feels nice and secure. And I don't have any problems with this kind of single finger groove here. Even with the size of my fingers, it fits in there quite nicely. Steel is M390. It's just over 2.5 inches long. We've got some jimping out here to place your either your index finger or your thumb on, as well as a crowned spine, which is one of those kind of Italian traits that I really like. And that crowning goes all the way around. Even though the tang of the knife itself is a little bit proud of the handle scales itself, it's not uncomfortable at all. It doesn't create any hot spots thanks to that rounded over nature. And of course, you've got a lanyard tube here at the front, as well as a huge lanyard tube at the back, almost like carabiner sized. So you could do some lashing things with this in an emergency, even though this is not really a survival knife. But the carbon fiber ones look really cool. But I think my favorite version is this sheep's foot green micarta version right here. The blade itself is just going to make a fantastic utility knife, full flat grind, stonewash finish in this particular one rather than the satin finish on this particular drop point I just showed you. And of course, micarta is going to provide plenty of grip, especially in harder conditions when you might be sweaty, things might be getting wet. That micarta is going to grip a little bit nicer. It's a really compelling utility knife, everyday carry utility, and it, again, holds quite nicely. And the sheaths they come with are quite nice also. Now you can see here they've actually made it so that they only need to have one particular part. The sheath will fit either of the blade shapes, but it is Kydex, clicks in quite nicely, and it actually comes with an ulti-clip pre-installed. So it's going to be very easy to carry as a pocket knife. It is nice and secure, but you simply click that open. You can feed that through the hem of your pocket, lock it down, and it's really not going anywhere. And one of the other cool things I've seen, even though this is attached with 2 screws here, you could actually attach it with a single screw if you want, so that once you clip that to your pocket, you could actually rotate the sheath. Maybe if you've got like an angled pocket on like a carpenter pant, you can kind of angle it forward and it'll hide in that pocket a little more subtly rather than sticking out. Now the hole patterns here are intelligently spaced. These will fit a small tech lock if you'd rather have a more conventional belt attachment. And we've also got a nice wide slot here at the front to carry this as a neck knife if you want to thread something through there. All right, just got a few more fixed blades for you this week. Nothing super new, actually. Well, a little bit. We've got a new version of the heavy-duty companion from Mora, or Morakniv if you're going to be a stickler, and we're on the internet, might as well be a stickler about things. These are, of course, Mora's, priced very affordably. This is about 19 bucks right now, and it's the slightly thicker bladed version of their popular companion knife. So you get a little bit more rigidity or a little bit more toughness. This is a carbon steel blade. So again, really classic option for an outdoor utility or bushcraft knife. And of course, the rubberized handle is going to give you a good amount of grip, protect your hands from touching the steel if things happen to be really cold outside and you need to have like take your gloves off. You're not going to be touching any bare metal, which could be uncomfortable in those situations. And of course, it's got that classic Mora companion style sheath. Really simple, clicks into place. You've got a drain hole here at the bottom, as well as a folded over loop here that does have a bit of a kind of an S-hook design, so you can clip this onto your belt and it's not going to come off too easily until you intentionally remove it. And of course, you've got that little slot on the back that works with some of their sheath accessories that have the little nubbin on the front, so you can kind of piggyback some of these sheaths together if you like. We've also got a new fillet knife from Mora, coming in about 27 bucks. We've got a 6-inch blade, stainless steel in this case. And yes, it does have a fairly decent amount of flex. So this is not a rigid fillet knife. If you need that flex, this is going to be a really good option, really good affordably priced option. Make a pretty decent boning knife in the kitchen too, especially with a little bit of that flex. Boning or fillet knife there. But it's put together nicely as you'd expect. You've got the standard size companion handle, which is a little bit smaller than the heavy duty size. So keep that in mind also if you're looking at that heavy duty Mora. But I really like the kind of the high vis green, neon greeny, yellow, toxic green, whatever color you've got there. It should help a little bit with visibility if you're out on the water. Sheath itself, as you can see, it's very drainage friendly. It's essentially two slotted on each side. You can see here it clicks into place quite nicely. There is some belt attachment hardware if you want. I left those in the package. I don't have them in front of me. I apologize. But even if you don't want to use that, I think this right here in the sheath would make a great addition to a camp cook set, or of course your tackle box, or of course your kitchen. Of course, the handle itself is not the classiest looking thing out there. If you think it's going to clash with your fancy kitchen knives, you can leave it in this sheath and not feel guilty about throwing it in a drawer. We've also got the new version of the chisel knife from Mora. About a 3-inch blade coming in at about 15 bucks. And we do have a carbon steel blade here. And as you can see, we've got the chisel tip and chisel sharpened edge. And it is a true chisel on the back. We don't have a secondary bevel on the back side. The handle itself comes from their Pro series, so it's a little bit smaller. I do have slightly larger than average hands, for those of you in the comments out there that have been waiting for me to say that. But I still fit onto this handle quite nicely, and you've got a nice finger guard on this design as well, which I always appreciate too. But it's kind of cool that Mora actually makes a chisel, because of course, as you see on their heavy duty, they're more known for their Scandi ground knives, which is essentially traditionally is beveled straight to a 0, although Mora uses a ever so slight hollow grind these days to achieve their Scandi edges. But I've always thought of a Scandi grind as sort of a double beveled chisel or a double planed chisel. So it's kind of appropriate that they do actually make a chisel version as well. Here you can see the sheath. Similar functionality to that companion sheath. You got your drainage hole, your S-hook type of clip here at the back. And this is one of those knives that has that nubbin on the front that you can you piggyback some extra sheaths onto. All right, I saved the best for last, or at least my favorite fixed blade this week. These Moras were very affordable. This is not. This is part of our new inventory of Randall that we've been bringing into the KnifeCenter, and I really, really enjoy this particular knife, but it does come in at about $740 right now. It's expensive, I know, but they're in stock and ready to ship out right now. If you can find it on our site and order it, it's coming to you real quick. You're not gonna have to wait 6 years or whatever the Randall's waiting list is up to these days. What I really like about this particular knife, unlike most Randalls, it's not a tactical design. I'm not particularly much of a tactical guy, I'm more of an outdoors fixed blade guy. So I love this upswept trailing point Skinner design we've got here. We've got a carbon steel blade about 4.5 inches with a hollow ground main section. It's a hunting knife after all, very appropriate, but it's still gonna be nice and sturdy thanks to the thickness that you can see right there. Let's see, eyeball calipers, about 3/16 of an inch thick. But the handle of this knife I really like. I've always been a fan of maroon linen micarta, which is what we have here. And as you can see, we've got no visible tang either. But what's cool is this is not a two-piece handle. This is actually kind of traditionally constructed like a bunch of old stick tang buoys, except you've got that cool micarta construction here rather than more traditional wood. So you've got more stability, probably a little bit more grip when things get wet. And I'm usually not a big fan of finger grooves on a handle because they do kind of limit certain grips, but this one does fill my hand quite nicely. Of course, you got that really classy half guard there. It does come installed with some paracord. Of course, you can remove that if you want. The sheath as well has a little bit of paracord, but it's a very classic style of sheath. Got your belt loop here, snap retention for the handle, and a small pocket with a sharpening stone on the front, which is always appreciated. But it's just really cool. I've thought about buying this myself, but I haven't pulled the trigger yet. But now's your chance to own a Randall without the weight. It's just a really special piece. All right, finally, I've got a nice accessory here, a new version of the Exotac fireSleeve, which of course is a small holder for a standard Bic lighter. This is the new glow-in-the-dark version. And I don't have the actual price in front of me right now, but the other colors start around $16, so it's either the same as those or a few bucks more. But we'll have a link down there for you to check it out. Now, this is the version in the packaging, of course. I've also got one right here with a lighter in it. And what you can see from that is whatever color of the lighter you have is going to show through a little bit, in the light of day. Not when it's glowing, of course. That'll be a little bit different. But what I really like about these things, several things actually. First off, this right here with the cap on makes this waterproof. Normally, if the head of your Bic lighter gets wet, it's not going to work too well. This is going to be help prevent that, and it's still going to carry easily in the pocket. You can remove that, click it onto the back so you don't lose it. Strike it just per normal. Other things that are nice, the whole design floats, at least while the cap is on, so it's harder to lose. And you can see we've got a little bit of a strap right here, and you can actually use that to hold the gas button down. So you could use this like a candle. You could flick it, slide that little loop over that, and you can stick it deeper into like a tinder pile or something like that without actually having to hold it down with your thumb. Plus, it glows in the dark. It's really nice. A bit of a novelty, sure, but we do have the black and orange versions available of this as well, if you'd rather have something more traditional. All right, everyone, that's all I've got to show you this week. Love to know what you thought of the selection this week. Let me know your favorites down there below. And if you want to get your hands on any of these cool knives, we will leave links in the description that'll take you over to KnifeCenter.com. And while you're there, make sure you sign up for our Knife Rewards program. You might as well, since if you're going to buy one of these knives, you might as well earn some free money to spend on your next one. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center. I hope you're all staying safe, sane, and sanitary out there. See you next time.